So Jagmeet Singh is propping up Justin Trudeau, who is violating civil liberties in a way never seen in Canada before. So much so that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, which has been hibernating for 2 years, finally woke up. I can't believe it. And they announced they're actually going to sue the government to try and stop this madness. Here's the press conference they had today.
This week, the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act, an extreme law that has never been used, and it announced 2 emergency orders that will have sweeping consequences on individuals, orders that it passed outside of ordinary democratic processes. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has spoken out loudly against this declaration, and today we have our own announcement. We are taking the Government of Canada to court. We are here today because of the government's response to the protests and blockades. The government's emergency declaration is unprecedented and seriously infringes the charter rights of Canadians. The government has brought in an extreme measure that should be reserved for national emergencies, a legal standard that has not been met. Emergency powers cannot and must not be normalized. For all the peaceful and disruptive protests in Canada's history, some involving unlawful acts and protracted standoffs with police, never before has a government declared a national emergency under the Emergencies Act, and with that given itself the enormous powers to bypass the ordinary, accountable democratic process. Our commitment to equality and other rights is the reason that we strongly support the charter right to peaceful assembly. This is how marginalized people can stand up for their rights.
We plan to file a notice of application for judicial review, seeking a declaration that the emergency order and in the emergency order, the measures and the orders promulgated under it are not consistent with the Emergencies Act. This is the first time that a government has relied on the Emergencies Act. It is important from a rule of law perspective for the courts to scrutinize these actions and ensure that they are consistent with the purpose of the legislation and that the government does not overreach or infringe on the charter rights of Canadians. Thank you.
By the way, the lawyer leading the battle is Eva Krajewska. Bizarrely, coincidentally, she was Justin Trudeau's lawyer against Rebel News in both the 2019 and 2021 election commission debates when they banned our reporters and we had to run to federal court to exercise our civil rights. Krajewska was Trudeau's lead lawyer trying to stop us. We beat her twice, thank God. I don't know, maybe she's sick of working for a tyrant. No matter how much he paid her, she's the one leading the charge against Trudeau now. I guess she knows how he thinks, how he operates. Maybe she has some insight in how to beat him. Very interesting to me. Here's what old-timer NDP member of Parliament Sven Robinson has to say about the whole thing. You might remember Sven. He's a real civil liberties leftist, first openly gay MP, real Vancouver hippie, but also with a penchant for the finer things, including fancy jewelry, if you remember that story. But he just can't stomach what Jagmeet Singh is doing. Look at these comments he made today on Twitter in reaction to the Civil Liberties Association. He said, the NDP caucus in 1970 under Tommy Douglas took a courageous and principled stand against the War Measures Act. I didn't know that. Today's NDP under Jagmeet Singh betrays that legacy and supports Liberals on the Emergencies Act. Shame. A very dangerous precedent is being set. Whoa, Sven. And then he had a follow-up. He said this. He said, I was in the House during the 1988 debate on the Act when we were promised that emergency powers can only be used when the situation is so drastic that no other law of Canada can deal with the situation. That test has not been met. NDP can stop this. Will they? Wow. Give the guy credit. My question is, who will stand with Sven Robinson? Strangely, I will. I don't know if I would have expected that, but I'm not an NDPer, so it doesn't really count, does it? What about true civil libertarians on the left? Are there any of them still out there? Are they all fine? with this bonfire of our liberties? I remind you, there have been 3 righteous men in the Liberal Party who had the courage to stand up to Justin Trudeau. Who would have thought? And actually, I don't think they were kicked out of the Liberal Party. I think Trudeau is more scared than he lets on, and if he would have kicked them out, maybe more would have followed. So if Liberals, the least principled species of politician in the country, can show courage, at least 3 of them, cannot a single NDPer stand against this? Not one. Sven has broken the ice. You can follow him now. Not one cares about civil liberties or even just standing with working people, just out of class solidarity. Not one. And it's not just the bad justification for the bad plan of action. It's who the Liberals are putting in charge of it. Who is Justin Trudeau deputizing to lead his paramilitary action against the truckers? And that's what it is. That's what the Emergencies Act contemplates. Who is the man of action who will finally do something rather than just have cops wandering around handing out brochures as they've been doing in recent days? Who will knock some skulls? Who will arrest men and women and children if need be? Who will jail civilians? Who will pull men out of their cabs with brute force? Who will use tear gas on civilians? Who will be as violent as necessary to get things done? Who will kill if there needs to be killing? Well, who's Canada's dirtiest ex-cop? Someone so disgraced that the city in which he used to police had to pay out millions of dollars to his victims in the worst policing abuse in modern Canadian history. Who knows the awful things to do, and who has the amorality, the immorality, the lack of human conscience to allow him to do it and make him order other police to be immoral as well? Who will strip search women to humiliate them in the streets? He did that. Who will physically attack the men? Who will kettle innocent bystanders in a cage? Who is the sociopath who will give Justin Trudeau the blood that he wants? His name is Bill Blair, the disgraced, dirty ex-cop who ran Toronto's police during the G20. But you may know him by a different title. He's Trudeau's minister in charge of emergency preparedness. He is the one who has the cold blood needed to do whatever violence Trudeau and Gerald Butts want. Tomorrow I'll tell you what he did during the G20, a disgraceful act that disqualifies him from working anywhere else, but that made him perfect in Trudeau's eyes. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.